What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. My name is TAETRO, and I really didn't expect my last video on music theory to be so popular, but it seems like you all really enjoyed it. You know, here in this video today, we're going to continue on breaking down the foundations of music theory in a way that you as a home studio music producer, as a musician, can hopefully understand in an easier, more approachable way than it's kind of traditionally taught, because I struggle with that a lot as a musician when I was learning. It really did not click in my brain for quite some time. So I've decided to start this monthly series where I break down the fundamentals of music theory, how I actually use them practically in my day-to-day music production. Today's video is going to be sponsored by Skillshare, but we'll talk about that later. And if you did miss last month's video, it's really important that you go back and watch it, or at least be sure that you have an understanding on the secret formula for forming a major key, for understanding a major scale on any note. We'll of course do a little bit reviewing through today, but like I said at the top, today the focus is on chords. And I really think this is the next logical place to go. I think a lot of typical instruction will have you use the knowledge of creating a major scale and now have you create a melody or something. But it's no use if you can create a melody and you don't know how to form chords under it. And usually my approach is forming melody on top of a chord progression anyway, or at least hearing the implied chord progression that's under an existing melody in my head. But don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. Let's start building some chords. Okay, so a very quick review, because we are going to build on this knowledge from the last video. We remember the secret formula for a major scale: whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Meaning we have ways of counting the distance between notes here on the keyboard. This note here, C, to a C sharp, that is a half step. There are no notes in between those two notes. Same as E to F. There's no notes in between here. On the other hand, C to D, that's a whole step. We have to take 1, 2 steps to get there. That's a whole step. Same as, let's say, F sharp to G sharp. That's a whole step, because there's a note in between them. So if the notes are directly touching each other, that's a half step. If the notes have one note in between them, that's a whole step. So follow that formula: whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and we can build a major key on any key, starting here. That's C major. Let's start on something now like F. Same formula, just starting on a different key. And we can see that we get a new collection of notes, but we get basically the same sound, the sound of a major scale. Now that's our key. Whatever note we pick, say we pick C, say we pick F, say we pick G sharp, that is the key that we're in. And for now, as beginner musicians understanding music theory, we're going to lock ourselves in to that collection of notes. So for today, why don't we stick with the key of F just to go along with this? So the key of F, like I just played for you, again, use that secret formula: whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And let's call those notes out. We have F, G, A, B flat is what we'll call this today, C, D, E, F. Now in the previous video, I talked about how actually every note has two names and how we can call notes either flat or sharp. Today, we're calling this B flat. So that's the scale we're working with today. So if we are truly locked in to that collection of notes, to form chords, we're going to start combining different notes. And in doing that, the only possible notes we can use in these combinations will be those 7 notes: F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E. And then, of course, that's F on top, so we don't count it again. We already have it here. And first, we need to define what is a chord. Well, a chord is comprised of 3 notes minimum. There are no 2-note chords. It must have 3 notes in order for it to be a chord. If it has 2 notes, we just consider that an interval. That's not a full chord. And a very basic way of looking at it is actually that a chord has a starting note. So let's pick any starting note in the key of F. Hey, let's start with F. Seems like a good place. And then let's play every other note starting from F. Remember, it's every other note, but within the key of F, those notes that we're locked into. So if it goes F, G, A, and we're going to play every other note, we're going to play F and A. We skip one. Let's do that again. Skip one here. We're going to skip B, which isn't even in key, so we're going to skip B flat, technically. And then we're going to go up to C. And now we have formed this first chord here. We're going to call that F major. Why am I calling it F major? We'll talk about that in a minute. So understand that concept there. We're really just playing every other note. We're going to dive into this more technically in a moment. But now let's go up the scale. We can build a chord on every single note of this scale. So let's start on G. And let's do the same thing. We're going to play G. And remember, we're in the key of F major. We're going to skip a note and play the next note in key, which is B flat. And then we're going to skip a note. We're going to skip C and go to D. And that is the next chord in the key of F major. Now remember, when I'm saying skip a note, we're only counting the notes that are in key. So when I say we're skipping a note between B flat and D, that's C, obviously I'm not counting this. That's not in the key. We're skipping the notes. We're talking in key. Don't forget that. The only notes we're worried about right now are the 7 notes we've identified as being in key. Can't stress that enough. What you might notice right now, just off the bat here, is that we played 2 chords, F, A, C, and that's F major. And then we went up to the next chord in the scale, which is G minor. Now we're throwing out fancy terms here, major and minor. Where is that even coming from? Well, let's get a little bit more technical slightly than just saying, oh, we're just skipping notes. We're actually not just skipping notes. This is very intentional what we're doing here. So let's focus on just this interval right here because it's not a chord, it's only 2 notes. This right here is what determines it to be major or minor, that first interval in the chord. If I play this, that probably sounds very pleasant, probably a little bit happy. If I play the next interval, which is from our G minor chord, that might sound a little darker, a little less happy. That is because these intervals are known as 1, a major third, and 2, a minor third. And that is where these chords get their names. Why do they have their names like that? Well, actually, we've already learned about whole steps and half steps, but there's another way to talk about the relationship between notes, and it's a word that I've already been throwing around, which is interval. So we're not going to talk about every single interval today. We're really only going to talk about thirds, but just to plant a couple seeds and forget about the notes in our scale for a moment. If I do this, we've already learned that that's called a half step. But in terms of intervals, this is like Jaws, right? We're going to call that a minor second. So if you think of, F as the first, it makes sense that this would be called the minor second, right? And if you wanted to take a guess at what this whole step would be called in terms of intervals, if we go from a minor second, you might guess that that might be called a major second. And as we go through, if I go from F to G sharp, again, we're forgetting about our key signature and all that. We're just counting these intervals for the moment. F to G sharp is a minor third. So we went from seconds to now we're in thirds. And I'll give you one quick guess. The next interval, major third. So right there, that's as far as I'm going to go with that until a little bit later. But just understand that we have words for each interval. And remember, it's not just a word for like the distance between the notes. It's a word for the relationship between the notes. What is the interval? Minor second, major second, minor third, major third. So you can probably already guess that our first chord here, F major, is called F major because it has a major third in it. And then the next chord that we play, G minor, is called G minor because its first interval is a minor third. That is going to apply for every chord that you play, especially as we go up the scale further. Now, what about that note on top? And here's the reason that actually chords need to be 3 notes. Because if I just play this interval, based on everything I just told you, we can't tell if it's major or minor, right? Because there's no third in the middle. If I play this note, which is correct and in the key of F major, we get an F major chord. However, if I play this note, that's F minor. That's why chords need to have 3 notes. And that top note there, we talked about seconds, thirds. I guess I kind of skipped fourths. Perfect fourth. Here comes the bride. Well, skip fourth for now, and then we go up. We have a perfect fifth. You might recognize it as Star Wars. Please don't copyright strike that. But yeah, there's little, like I said, jaws before too. There's little, I guess, mnemonics. What do you call that? Whatever it's called. Little ways you can remember these intervals. But nonetheless, you all already know how to count half steps. So you can just remember that a major third is 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. You can remember that a minor third is -1 from that, 3. And you can remember that a perfect fifth is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 half steps. Don't forget that half steps can also be called semitones. So that was a lot of information to take in. Just remember that a chord is made up of 3 notes. We are locking ourselves in key now, so we're back to saying that we're only going to play notes in F major. A quick shorthand for forming chords is to play every other note in key, right? So F, skip a note, A, skip a note, C, F, A, C. Go up the scale, start on G, G, skip a note, B flat, skip a note, D. That gets us our G minor chord. And you also just learned that instead of using that shorthand and saying just skip a note, that we're actually playing a third up from that root note. A major third being 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps or semitones up from the root, and a minor third being 1, 2, 3 semitones up from the root. Remember, we're always talking about these notes in relation to each other, and we're counting up from there. So if you really needed to know, you would know. If you even got to F and you were like, oh, I'm not sure if this should be F minor or F major. Well, in the key of F major, we're going to expect that the F is major. But as we move on through F, G, A, how are you even going to know if that's supposed to be major or minor? You could rely on the every other note rule, right? If we start on A and we go to the next note in key, which is B flat, skip it, and then go to the next note, which is C. We have C, and then we, skip another note, D, and then to E. We get that. And maybe you're not sure by listening to that. Is that major or minor? Just count. 1, 2, 3. 3 semitones means it's a minor third. We've got the fifth on top. And now we have A minor. So the first 3 chords in F, F major, G minor, A minor. This is going to follow us all the way up the scale. And it's not just about being able to identify all these chords. It's also about being able to put them in order to make a cool chord progression. And this is going to get easier and easier as we go. But that was the hardest part. But real quick, before we go any further, maybe we should take a little bit of a break. And I am actually really proud to show you all something. So give me 1 minute. I have taken up a hobby. I think this is important for all musicians to take up a hobby. And it actually ties in with today's sponsor. So hold on one moment. But I've started watercolor painting. I hope you all can see that. That's the moon. These are the ocean waves. And you all know that this series is, of course, sponsored by Skillshare. And they have a great watercolor course. So I want to take this moment to show off my paintings and give a big thank you to our sponsor for today's video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey. You can take thousands of inspiring classes on Skillshare, including classes on music production, music theory, art, photography, business, and more. Today, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free premium membership to Skillshare. And with the Skillshare free premium membership, you get access to all of the classes on Skillshare. So if you like this topic of music theory, they have music theory explained by an Ableton certified trainer within the context of the DAW, which is really great. Another music-related course I can't recommend enough is the How to Mix Your Music course with Young Guru. I credit that course with how I got my sound to be a bit more professional in the last few months or year. And then, like I alluded to before, we all kind of need a break from music sometimes, and having another creative outlet for me has actually been very awesome to refresh my mind. So I've been taking up watercoloring, and I cannot recommend this course on doing simple watercolors. It's from Skillshare, so consider checking that one out too. And you know, I would say I'm not like a world-class painter or anything, but I'm pretty stoked on my progress so far. So don't forget, first 1,000 of my subscribers, use the link in the description, get your free month of the Skillshare free premium membership. And if you support the sponsor, you support the channel. So I thank you all so much for that. For now, let's get back into it. I know it's a lot to talk about, but chord progressions. Let's go. All right, so we're back in it. We're making chord progressions. And if you all remember, we just learned about major and minor thirds and how to start forming chords, right? Chords are made up of a root note, a third, and a fifth. And basically staying in the rule set of we're only allowed to use the notes in our major scale. That kind of dictates whether this becomes a major third or a minor third. So on the F chord that we formed, we know that it can't be this note in the middle here because that note's not in the key. But when we go up to G, we might be tempted to make it this, which is a nice G major sound. But that's not in the key of F. We have to stick to the notes in our scale. So the only other option there is the B flat. It can't be this. That's not a third at all. And we can tell right away that those notes are way too close to each other. And it definitely can't be this. Same problem. That's not a third, and these notes are now too close to each other. We're forming these evenly spaced chords with 3 notes. Which, by the way, fancy term for these 3-note chords is called triad. So if you see that thrown around, that's what people are talking about. So continue that logic up the scale. Reminder, we are in F major. Following that all the way up, we have F major, G minor. We discussed already A minor. The next chord is built on B flat. Don't get tripped up just because it's a black key. But let's go ahead, find the third. And the fifth, we have B flat major. You can probably hear that that's major. Keep going up. And then our next scale degree is C. Let's build a chord on here. Ah, that's C major. And we've probably seen that chord before already in other keys. Just file that in the back of your mind for a moment. The next scale degree in F is D. That's D minor, a D minor chord. This last chord here, the 7th chord, particularly nasty sounding chord, which is neither minor nor major. It's called diminished. But I want you to completely not care about that right now. Another thing, file it in the back of your head. We don't need to know that right now. We're barely ever going to use this chord at this stage. And then the next, obviously, scale degree is F. We're back at the top. F. So you just were able to make chords on every note of the F major scale. That sounds satisfying. Now, much like the major scale video, the whole purpose of me explaining that to you in this way is not so that you can learn the chords in F major, but so that you can learn the chords of any key by understanding those concepts. So let's switch keys for this moment. And this is very much going to be a brain exercise. So if it feels a little bit tough, that's okay. But this will become more ingrained in your mind, where it almost will become instinctual after a while. So let's really switch things up here, and let's go to the key of D. Why not? So now, forget about F major. We are going to set ourselves in the land of D major. And let's refresh our memory. Remember whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half to find our major scale first. That's the first step. Whole. Good. So in our scale, we've just found, we've got D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. Again, I did that using the whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half formula. Sounds like all the other major scales, just starting on a different note. So remember, now we know how to make chords in any key. So let's start right here on D. Remember that shorthand, we can skip a note. Even if you need to write down the notes in the scale for now, that's okay too. So you don't accidentally play a wrong note. Because we're going to go from D. We know it's not E, that's too close. We're going to skip E. We're going to go to the next note in key, which is F sharp. That forms a major third, surprise, surprise. And our fifth on top. We skip a note here and we go to A. Same process here, that's D major. And now we go to the next scale degree in D here. And we go to E, skip the next note in key, play G, skip the next note in key, play B. That's E minor. Interesting, E minor. Again, because I can count 1, 2, 3 semitones versus the 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones from D to F sharp. That's what makes it major. And the 3 semitones is what makes it sound minor. Then the next in key note is not F, but F sharp. Don't get confused here. Skip the next in key note. Go to the next in key note. Skip the next in key note. Go to the next in key note. This is F sharp minor. Now, this is where many people will get tripped up because we've got 2 black keys in this chord. But just remember, if you for some reason played this C, it's because you weren't paying attention to the rules and you weren't sticking to only notes in D major. This note is not in D major. This note is in D major, but it's too far away. Look at all those notes in between. And then this note, again, it is in D major, but it's too close. You remember, we're built off of a third and a fifth. Only notes in key. Let's keep going. I'm going to go kind of faster through this. The next triad is G major, followed by A major. We can't play this C, it's not in key. So we get that C sharp. Then we get B minor, followed by C sharp diminished, which we don't care about. And then we resolve back to D major. Okay, If that is a lot for you to wrap your mind around, that's okay. Go back, try it slower, and just remember all the rules we talked about. But the system that is really important to understand here is that if you noticed, when we were talking about F major and when we were talking about D major, two similar things. The first chord in D major is a major chord. The second chord in D major is a minor chord. Now, forget everything, go back to F major. The first chord in F major is a major chord. And the second chord in F major is a G minor chord. And let's keep going further. The third chord in F major, minor. Number 4, major. Number 5 is major. Number 6 is minor. And number 7, I don't care about. What if I told you that this is the same for literally every single key? Just like the formula for a major scale, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. The formula for forming chord progressions in a major scale is exactly the same. And we can actually represent it with Roman numerals. 1, a capital Roman numeral, is major. 2, we're going to make that lowercase because that's minor, and that's how we'll signify that. That's a minor chord. 3, lowercase again, it's a minor chord. 4 is major, uppercase Roman numeral. 5, uppercase 5, it's major. 6 is a minor chord, so it's going to be a lowercase 6 Roman numeral. And 7, I dread talking about it, but it's diminished. We give it a lowercase Roman numeral, and it gets a little circle next to it. Like I said, you don't need to worry about that right now. But forget about the names of the notes. Those Roman numerals are what you want to burn into your brain. Because if I say to you, I want to play a song and I want to play it in C major, the chord progression is 1, 5, 6, 4. Well, since you already know how to form chords in any key, if you know 1, 5, 6, 4, you already know that that's 1 major, 5 major, 6 minor, and 4 major. And if you know we're playing in C major, you say, okay, that's great. I know whole, whole, half, whole, half. I can figure out the notes really quick. Okay, what did he say? 1, 5, 6, 4. Got it. And that means that's C major, G major, 6 is minor, A minor, 4 is major. I'm not going to play this. First of all, this note isn't even in the key of C major. Second of all, you know that the 4 chord is always major. But now if I said, let's play that same song, but let's play it in F. We already played F today. It's the same chord progression. 1, 5, 6, 4. The same rules apply. First, find your notes of F major. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Great, that's our rule set. That's like we're stuck with those notes only. 1, we know it's a major chord. 5, we know it's a major chord. 6, we know it's a minor chord. And 4, we know it's a major chord. Find the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, I'm counting the notes in the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you will often hear musicians call out chord progressions like that. 1, 4, 6, 5. 4, 5, 6, 1. So if we're in the key of F major, what's the 4, 5, 6, 1 chord progression? 4. Let's start here. 4. 5 is the next chord. 6. Suddenly, this starts to sound like a song. Probably sounds like a lot of songs because of what I just told you. Chord progressions are interchangeable through keys. So maybe you know a song that sounds like that, but is in a different key. Maybe that song is in D major. I can still play 4, 5, 6, 1 in D major. Flourish back to the 5 there. But as you can tell, that chord progression sounds pretty similar to the 4, 5, 6, 1 chord progression because they're exactly the same. They're 4, 5, 6, 1, just in different notes. That's the same reason a major scale sounds the same pretty much, just like if you play a major scale on F major, and then if you play C major, they have the same sonic quality. That's why we call them major scales. And that's with these chord progressions, that's why they're labeled the same thing in any key. So now, hopefully you understand the system around chord progressions, not just how to make chord progressions in any one key, but now understanding how to find the notes of any key and understanding how to build the chords on any key is incredibly invaluable, because now you can be playing in any key and you can form a chord progression. And I know I was joking before about I don't care about the 7th chord, it's half diminished, whatever. The reason for that is some of these chords are more common than others, and some of these chord progressions are more common than others, like the one I just played. Let's play in C to keep things simple, which, by the way, if you saw me playing my left hand, I'm literally just playing the root note of the chord, kind of doubled on the bottom. But playing in C major, you've heard this is one of the most common chord progressions. And then the one I played before, 4, 5, 6, 1. Without me playing that wrong note in the bottom there. You've heard that before. You've probably heard lots of these. What's that? That's 3 to 4. 6 to 5. Where am I getting those numbers from again? Don't forget, count the notes in the scale. 1 is the 1 chord, 2 is the 2 chord, 3 is the 3 chord. It all goes back to those scale degrees that we learned. We learned how to form that major scale. Also, a callback to the last lesson where I told you to find the 6th note of any scale to find the minor. Well, guess what? It's no coincidence, there's no such thing as a coincidence, that the 6th scale degree forms a minor chord when you build a chord on top of it. So let's say you wanted to play in a minor chord, it's the same thing applies. So let's say you wanted to play a minor chord progression, you might go to the 6th of the major scale. Because that's the relative minor. Start to listen to the songs that you love and start to notice similar chord progressions and see if you can identify the Roman numerals behind them, because you don't need to have perfect pitch and know exactly what key a song is to be able to hear and be able to identify it. Because now I can do that in any key for you, like go into F, you can tell that that was the same chord progression, even though it's in a different key. My final tip for you as you start experimenting with this is if you do jump between different keys, it's always good to do like a little bit of a palette cleanse, like play a bunch of nonsense notes or just play through the scale that you're switching to. So if I'm going from C major, it's important for me to, okay, I'm switching to F major, to just hear that scale and that tonality, because I'll tease maybe a little bit more advanced stuff for the next month's lesson. But if you notice, when I play F, the 5th chord in F is C major. Well, the 1 chord in C is C major. So we might get confused. Our brains might get confused, but don't let it. Just start fresh, little ear cleanse, play the scale that you're in so you properly hear that tonality, and then go from there. Now you can build chords in any key and you can start building your own chord progressions. All right, I hope that wasn't information overload, but I do think this is the next logical step for you to be able to work your way around creating your own tracks. You understand how to make a major scale now, and you understand how to make a chord progression. But if you're still taking time to wrap your mind around it, have no fear, that's how we learn. I don't expect anybody to watch a video like this all the way through and fully understand the concept by the end. You might have to pause and practice or restart. And by the way, that watercolor stuff I told you about before, some of the tutorials are only 10 minutes long. Like I believe for these trees, it was only like 10 minutes long. However, to do a small painting like this, something I've never done before, a new concept, a new thing to learn, took me probably 2 or 3 hours to actually do. So I'm stopping the video, pausing it, watching again, rewinding, listening again. That's the process of learning. That's how it should be. So don't forget that. That applies directly to music. And speaking of the paintings, by the way, if you do support the sponsor and you decide to get your free trial of Skillshare Premium, it actually supports the channel a lot. So please just sign up. You don't have to pay anything. Take advantage of the 1 month free. If you like it, keep it. If you don't, you can move on from it. No cost to you. But even if you sign up for free, it supports the channel. So don't forget that. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Twitter. I'm updating those pretty regularly, and tune into a live stream sometime here on the channel. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss a future one. Important links and all of that are in the description, and let me know in a comment down below if you found this helpful and what direction you want this series to go for next month's installment. But thank you all so much for watching. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.